Hi, friends. I apologize. A moment ago, I started this broadcast and had some issues with my allergies and needed to go before I was really done. I'm going to start this over. So if any of you were joining before and this is repetitive, I apologize. But this is a subject that's on my heart. I thought maybe on a Friday, even though I am working and today's going to be a normal lawyering day for me, I'd like to step out of that role a little bit and play the amateur marriage counselor and talk about some pitfalls I see in marriage and what to do about it, how to improve your marriage. I mean, more than 50% of marriages today in the United States end in divorce. And when you're in a situation like my wife Kathy and I are in, where you've been divorced more than once, and then you're remarried, the statistical probability of divorce is 74%. So I think we have to be very intentional about how we go about conducting our marriages. And it's something I've done a lot of work on and study and tried to do the best I can. I want to give a couple of ideas for how to beat the odds and avoid having your marriage become a statistic. And not only that, but avoid having your marriage maybe continue, but be stale and unhappy. So, I've listened a lot to John Gottman, John and Julie Gottman. They're a couple, both very prominent, very intelligent marriage counselors, and they've done a lot of research and about what makes marriage work. And I heard a speech by John Gottman a couple of weeks ago where he said that the average American couple only talks to each other 35 minutes a week. 35 minutes a week. Think about it. A week includes 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in all that time, the couple, I mean, that's what, 420 hours a week. Sorry, no, it's anyway, do the math. I didn't do the math before I came on here, but you got a lot of hours, a lot of minutes in a week to work with, and only 35 is going to talk to the spouse. Well, how can we nurture and grow a relationship when we're spending only 35 minutes a week doing that? And most of that 35 minutes is spent talking about who's going to pay that bill, who's going to pick up little Johnny from soccer practice, just dealing with administrative detail. And you have to ask yourself, is that why I got married? So I could have a personal secretary to help me deal with the administrative affairs of life? Is that why you got married? I didn't. I think we got married because we wanted to love and be loved. And of course, dealing with the details of life is an important part of having a life together, but that's not all. So my first suggestion is let's carve out some time to be with our spouses. Make it a priority. Don't make it the last thing on the list that gets accomplished, and your spouse just gets the leftovers. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as most of you know, and we have a big emphasis in our faith on marriage, and we believe marriage lasts for eternity. It's one of the few things that you get to take with you when you die. that this marriage covenant lasts perpetually on and on into eternity. Well, if that is true, if it's the thing that lasts, our divorce rate is about the same as the general public. And I think I was a little shocked recently reviewing some of the statistics. The leading cause to which divorced Latter-day Saints attribute their divorces is adultery. Still the biggest cause of divorce, at least according to the divorced people that are surveyed within the church. Well, how does this happen? I think it probably happens because people get married and they're focused a lot on each other. They want to spend every minute they can together, and time goes on and life takes over, and they stop spending the time together. They start only talking about boring administrative details. And they may not even realize it consciously, but they're lonely. And then somebody comes along who is genuinely interested in them and what they have to say and what they think. And the spouse thinks, oh, I learned everything about what he or she thinks a long time ago. We have nothing left to talk about. I've heard everything he or she has to say. Well, you get that mentality against this new person that comes along who is fresh and new and seems to be enamored with everything you have to say. And sometimes people are shocked that the person their spouse cheated with is not even very attractive. I mean, often that is true, that because an affair isn't typically just about sex. It's normally about a need that isn't being met within the marriage, and oftentimes they're just lonely. And I'm not condoning affairs, by the way. I'm far from it. I don't believe in that, obviously, but it's important to carve out more than 35 minutes a week to talk to your spouse, and then talk about, something new. Where would we like to go on a vacation if we could go anywhere in the world? And what would we like to do and see? What's our bucket list? Go back to talking about your hopes and dreams, maybe the way you did when you were a young couple, when you were dating. Talk about the kind of things that get you motivated. What books have you read recently? If you're on a self-improvement journey, which I recommend, what books have you read? What scriptures have you read? What has given you insight into your life? If you're still a growing and evolving kind of person, bring that to your marriage, and that'll keep your marriage fresh. And like I said, connect more than 35 minutes a week. My wife and I have only been married 2 years, but I know we're connecting more than 35 minutes a day. And I don't want that to change. So that's my first suggestion is, if you're not putting in the time, put in the time. Relationships take time. There's no two ways about it. It's like trying to grow a little sapling into a tree with no fertilizer, no water, no sunshine. If you're only giving your marriage 35 minutes a week, you're not giving it enough. So that's first suggestion. Second suggestion, the Gottmans did a study where they had couples in apartments that they had built out to look just sort of like home. And they had them hooked up to machines that monitored their vital signs, and they asked them to talk about the things that were points of conflict in their marriage. And they found a couple of interesting things. Number one, couples where one person or the other's heart rate reached above 100 beats per minute. Guess how many of those couples were able to resolve the conflict that they were in? 0. There is a 0% chance that if you're in a conflict with your spouse and one person's heart rate reaches 100 beats per minute, there is a 0% chance that you're going to reach a successful resolution to that conflict in that conversation. Okay, now you may have heard it doesn't matter, that communication is the most important thing, and that it doesn't even matter if you yell and scream, get that out, vent, whatever. Well, we're finding that isn't true. The research shows that it's not true. That continuing to go on and let the fire burn while nobody's listening is an exercise in frustration and futility, and in fact, it's a high predictor of divorce. Here's another thing that they found. In a separate control group, when somebody's heart rate reached 100 beats per minute, they would tell these people something that wasn't exactly true, but they would say, "Oh, we're having problems with our equipment. Would you please stop for a moment, pause, talk about something else, but don't deal with this conversation that you've been having." And they would give them time to let their vitals drop, to let their heart rate drop, to let them calm down. And then they would say, "Go ahead and resume your conversation." A high percentage of those people were able to successfully resolve the conflict because they were in a calmer frame of mind. Now, what is the lesson of that for your marriage? We all, particularly those of us at middle age who may have been through a divorce or something else traumatic, we have trauma. There are things that people do and say that trigger it. You may have trauma from earlier times in your marriage to your spouse when they did or said something very hurtful that you've been carrying around. And when that trauma gets triggered, you have what we call emotional flooding. And it's a good metaphor. You're flooded because you've got so much emotion going on inside of you, you can no longer hear the other person and what they're saying. And continuing in a conversation when one or both people are flooded is counterproductive and can be harmful. So what do you do when you realize that you're flooded or the other person's flooded? The Gottmans suggest, and Kathy and I have taken this to heart in our marriage. You take a time out. Now, Kathy and I have a rule that we've established in our relationship where if one person calls a timeout, that's the end of the discussion for that time. It's like a pause button. And the other person, once somebody calls timeout, the conversation about that subject completely stops. There are no last words. There's no texting about it. There's nothing else, no further communication about it until you come back together. Now that's the other part of the rule. You come back together and talk about it as soon as you are ready. There's no holding each other over the fire for days and weeks. It should be, in the vast majority of the cases, no more than a couple hours. Maybe once in a great while. But it's not designed to hold somebody over the fire or to punish them or to check out. The purpose of taking a time out during a discussion where somebody's flooded is to give that person, or both people, if they're both flooded, a chance to let them calm down, to let them get some perspective, to breathe. And then you come back together and you're able to work constructively again. And I can say in the last 2 years that I've been married to Kathy, this has been something vital. And there have been a few occasions where one of us didn't honor the timeout, or where we both didn't, and it's always been a bad experience. So it's important. It's in our relationship, it's vital that you're able to take a timeout and honor it. And the corollary to that, as I said, is you've got to be able to come back together in a reasonable amount of time and talk about how you're both feeling, and resolve things. Be solution focused. That, I believe, is extremely important. I mentioned before, for any that weren't tuned in at the time, that the Gottmans had done a study that showed that when one person's heart rate reaches 100 beats per minute, the chances of them successfully resolving whatever conflict they're in are 0%. Zero. So when you're flooded, or your partner is flooded, you're getting nowhere by continuing the discussion. It is only doing harm. Okay, so just to summarize, this isn't everything I know about marriage or everything I think, but these are two very important points. And I'm going to summarize them before I go. Number one, the average American couple spends 35 minutes a week talking to each other, and most of that is about administrative detail. If we want our marriages to survive, talk more than 35 minutes a week and give yourself time to talk about things that are more enjoyable to talk about, enjoying one another and who that person is. And if it's gone stale, revive it. Talk about your hopes and dreams. Talk about the things that you want out of life. Talk about your personal development journey and the things you've learned about yourself, about what makes life happier. Keep it fresh. Treat it like a tree or a plant that you have to water and fertilize, and then it bears delicious fruit, and your relationship is the same. Secondly, when one person in a conversation's heart rate reaches 100 beats per minute, there is a 0% chance that argument is going to resolve successfully in that moment. So take a time out. Have a rule in your marriage that when one of you calls time out, the conversation is over until that person comes back. All right? The second part of that rule is they come back as soon as reasonably possible. That could be anywhere from 20 minutes to a few hours. Not days, not weeks. It's not to hold the other person over the fire. It is to allow each party to compose themselves. And then come back together, and your chances of resolving it are much higher. So putting in the time, spending time together, and resolving conflict constructively, not with yelling and screaming, not with anger, not with big emotional expressions, but being solution focused, being calm, and having the opportunity to listen to each other, I think, are really important. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I know none of us is perfect at marriage, and I'm certainly not. I have made my share of mistakes, and I have been divorced. So, but I hope that you can learn from my mistakes and from whatever wisdom I have accumulated, both from successes and failures, and make your marriage something beautiful, because I hope and believe it can be. All right? Maybe we'll talk about this again sometime. Any comments that you have, feel free to make constructive comments or give advice in the comment section, and I'll talk to you all again soon. And remember, if you need legal help, feel free to private message me. Give me a call. I'm a professional problem solver, and I can help you out. So we'll talk soon.